Alright, video number 2 of recording in a very big, echoey hotel room here up in Whistler. Again, I am not at home. In a land far, far away. Actually, it's about a 2-ish hour drive from Vancouver, so it's not that far away. But we're still here. There are still people outside having fun, screaming. You know, it's Whistler, right? Skiing, snowboarding, all that stuff. So I apologize if you hear any of that in the background. I'll do my best to try to use the noise-canceling functions on Adobe Audition to try to get rid of that. But I wanted to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs today because it is a very, very big topic. It was Kyle Dubas' press conference the other day that alluded to fans, media, and everybody in the sporting world alike what exactly the Leafs have in store in terms of what they want to do heading into the trade deadline. Here's an article on The Score summing everything up, so we don't need to go bouncing around in different sources over here. Toronto Maple Leafs GM Kyle Dubas said he is willing to trade a top prospect to help his club's chances in 2021. The April 12th trade deadline was a prominent talking point during Kyle Dubas' midseason availability on Tuesday, and the GM divulged that he hopes to complete a trade sooner than later to mitigate the 14-day quarantine period between Canada and the United States. He added that he'd prefer a rental player due to the flat salary cap, and Toronto is keen on bolstering its forward group. We had to move out some forwards that were good for us in order to add on the back end, and thus we feel like that's an area where we may need to look into a bit more, Dubas said. Now, this is huge, because if you take a look at the actual verbatim, word-for-word quote that was used, it's linked here in the article. It was on Joshua Cloquet's Twitter account. Would you be willing to trade a top prospect to improve your team this season? Kyle Dubas flat out says yes. Just straight up, yes, I'd be okay with it. Let's do it. Let's trade a top prospect for what would be a rental player, because Dubas himself says he wants a rental guy, mostly because of the cap commitments. Again, the flat salary cap is a big thing, so if guys have contracts that extend to 2022 and 2023, it could be seen as a very big hurdle. It's kind of why the Jake Virtanen trade talks with Anaheim didn't really go anywhere. But for Kyle Dubas, it's really interesting to note just the kind of ideas that are being proposed in these situations, because right away here in the Score article, the next part right here talks about how some of the Leafs' top prospects include Nick Robertson, Rasmus Sandin, and last year's first-round pick Rodion Amirov. You take a look at what Darren Dreger said as well, Dubas acknowledging a willingness to trade a top prospect, I believe that falls in line with the Leafs' first-round pick and would or could be moved if the return was a near-perfect fit. Darren Dreger also says that he would put Robertson, Sandin, Liljegren, and Amirov in the same category as a first-round pick. It's really crazy to me because some of the names that have been linked to Toronto, you have the Felinos, and you have the Grenlins, and you have the Ricard Raquels, and all these guys, the Stalls maybe as well. It's kind of weird taking a look at some of the potential returns here, because if you take a look at the guys who are indeed expiring free agents next year, Kyle Palmieri's another one, Taylor Hall, of course, he's the big one. Would you trade any of these prospects for a Granlund or a Foligno? Taylor Hall's a different thing, but some of these guys are like mid-tier, honestly. I don't even really think it would take that much to pry away some of these players from teams that are willing to sell. But that's only assuming we're not talking about the big fish Taylor Halls and all that. So for Robertson, Sandin, Liljegren, Amirov, these top prospects in the Leafs organization, it would be really just mind-blowingly crazy if we saw, for example, a Nick Robertson trade for Mikael Granlund. Like, wow, that is absolutely a steal for Nashville if they go out there and do that. But aside from that, if we're going over the actual prospects in here, because I know a lot of Leafs fans are very attached, emotionally speaking, to guys like Robertson and to guys like Liljegren, whom they've been developing for a long time in their system. You have Rasmus Sandin, who is seen by many as a very good NHL defender down the line. However, the only side note we'll have is that it's actually revealed by Frank Seravalli that the Leafs do not want to touch Sandin in a trade because they view him as a contributor in the NHL when he gets back. So he might be the only name that's actually excluded when you talk about a top Leafs prospect in this idea here, but still. You also have that Amirov who was taken in the draft last year when you're talking about prospects. But in general, though, I've been seeing a lot of people out there talking about the overall need to trade these kinds of players, and I've been seeing both sides of the coin. Oh, why would you trade Robertson? He's an untouchable guy. Why would you trade Amirov? You just got him. Liljegren has been developing for years. What would be the point of trading him now? Well, the thing is, Kyle Dubas, what he is doing when he explains this quote here, yeah, I'd be willing to trade a top prospect. Darren Dreger is suggesting maybe he is also willing to trade a first-round pick for a rental player. What Dubas is really doing here is just going all in. Like, come on. There is no better season to go out here and say, all right, we're going to go out there and buy. We want to add as much depth to this group as we will be allowed to under the salary cap because we're only playing Canadian teams for the first 2 rounds. The Toronto Maple Leafs have been playing pretty well against most of the Canadian teams this year. It's why they have a winning record in this division. Now, sure, they've been colder as of late, but that doesn't dispute the fact that the majority of this season has seen Toronto actually be pretty good against Montreal, against Ottawa, against Winnipeg, against Edmonton, against Vancouver, and against Calgary. They've been good against all these teams. Again, that's without the recent skid of losing 5 games in your previous 6, with the only one win being an overtime win against the Jets. But the fact remains, the Leafs have high quantity amounts of wins over Winnipeg, over Vancouver, over Ottawa, over Edmonton, over Montreal, and over Calgary. This is a team that's already being built to win in this division, and it was written in Elliot Friedman's 31 Thoughts yesterday, but you're guaranteed to not playing a Tampa Bay or a Boston until the 3rd round. And for Toronto, if they're in a spot where they trade away a Rodion Amirov, for example, who was acquired last year in the draft, a guy who literally has only been in this organization for less than half a year, you trade this guy away for a piece that allows you to, I don't know, make it past the 1st round and go to a very tight Game 7 in Round 2 against the Montreal Canadiens, for example. And let's say that depth piece, 3rd line, 4th line, winger, middle 6 guy, whatever you want to say, sends a pass up to Mitch Marner, who comes in on a breakaway and he scores in overtime. Let's say that's the play that sends you to the 3rd round, where you finally face Boston or Tampa or whoever you face in that Stanley Cup semifinals. Would you say that trade is worth it? Now, I know, hypothetically speaking, one play should not define the entire status of a trade, but still, if the Leafs go that far, I think in some realm there would be a lot of Leafs fans that say, hey, sign me up, I'd do that. I would exchange the next future's worth of a career for one of these prospects if it guarantees us making the 3rd round this year. You know how crazy that would be for Toronto fans, making the 3rd round, let alone just winning one playoff series? This is the year to do that. There is no Hamartia for the Leafs this year. There's no one team that's the big bad boogeyman going out there eliminating them every single year that will be available to them in this year's 1st round. It is only Canadian teams whom the Leafs have already displayed an ability to win against. So it would make the most sense for Kyle Dubas to go out there and be in a buyer's position to say, okay, we want to get this done. We want to get a rental player. We want to be in the best position we can. And right now, Nick Robertson, he's in the AHL. He's not helping us out right now on the main Leafs squad. Rodion Amirov is in Russia. He's not going to come over for a while. He's staying there. He's not on this team. Liljegren, still developing. Sandin is a different conversation because he's not actually in any lineup at all because of the foot thing. Yeah, that sucks, doesn't it? But this team could be in a position where you need to use everything you can to go out there and bolster what you have in this year's playoffs, because you're guaranteed the best case scenario that's only been accomplished so many times throughout the past decade for these Canadian teams. 2011 had Vancouver go to the Western Conference Finals. You had the Montreal Canadiens were in there, the Winnipeg Jets in there, the Sens. But it doesn't happen often where you see these Canadian teams go that far, and it's guaranteed this year. It hasn't happened since 2018 when Winnipeg did it, but we're in a position now where it's guaranteed. So for Kyle Dubas to go out there and say, yeah, I'd trade a top guy for a rental player, it makes sense, it does, philosophically speaking. It's just whether or not you would actually see value in trading a Nick Robertson or a Sandin or a Liljegren or whatever for what is essentially going to be a few weeks, a few months of a guy. Because you still have to quarantine when you're coming over to Toronto. I doubt the Leafs would actually do business for a rental player with a Canadian squad because of how tight the Canadian division is. I don't really see any of these Canadian teams helping out any of their formidable dance partners here in war, but any of these American guys coming over, hey, maybe they're the answer here. Maybe you can go ahead and get an Eric Stahl. Play him over there with Thornton and Spezza and have yourselves a mid-2000s domination line. That sounds like a pretty cool idea. I don't know if it would be worth it to send over a first or Nick Robertson, but hey, the ideas of potential returns are indeed interesting. So talk to me in the comments what you think about this Maple Leafs idea here. Kyle Dubas wanting to go out there, making a trade, acquiring a guy. He wants to do it sooner rather than later so they can bypass that quarantine faster. But let me know in the comments any targets you think the Leafs should go after. Who should they trade? Who shouldn't they trade? Is it a Liljegren? Is it a Robertson? Is it a Sandin? Who should be deemed untouchable here? Should they just not do anything and roll with the roster they already have, much to the dismay of what Kyle Dubas wants to do? Let me know in the comments what you think. I hope you enjoyed this video. Trolls99. And bye.